Hey, everybody. I am so excited for this power panel on the future of unified communications, contact center, and beyond for 2025 with an extraordinary set of guests and speakers today. Let's start with introductions. Dave Michels, as always, industry analyst, creator, and founder of TalkingPointz, and so much more. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited about this power panel.
Well, you're the power behind the panel. Maybe introduce yourself, what you do, your body of work to the viewers here.
I am the principal and the unprincipled analyst of TalkingPointz.com. I work very closely with a lot of the UC and CC companies, and Mitel happens to be both. They're like a UC and a CC company. It's like no matter it just fits every category.
Well, you're in the spotlight today. You're in the hot seat today. So we look forward to your perspectives. As always, Eric Hanson, CMO of Mitel, a company that has a long and storied history, but really bright future. Eric, how are you? Maybe introduce yourself. And of course, who's Mitel these days?
Great. Thanks for having us, Evan. Really excited to be here with Dave and with Martin and yourself. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Mitel, and Mitel obviously has been in the unified communications and contact center space for over 50 years. We address both the needs of, sort of horizontally, lots of different industries, but also vertical solutions, frontline workers to knowledge workers and office workers. And with the acquisition of Unify a little over a year ago, we have the largest install base in the UC industry. 1 in 5 seats around the world is likely using Mitel. So excited to be here and talk about a number of topics with you.
I can't wait to dive in. And of course, Martin Bitzinger from Mitel. Wie geht's? Guten Abend, guten Tag. Great to have you here, Martin. Maybe introduce yourself, leading the product side at Mitel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eben. Thanks for having me. Really excited to talk about everything. So responsible for the product portfolio. Lots of great stuff, coming down the pipe from our perspective, both on the UC and the CC side. So lots to talk about, certainly. Based in Germany, and really excited to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining. We've had great conversations, and I'm so excited about this year. And let's set the scene. UCaaS is continues its evolution, but hybrid cloud seems to be where the action is at. In terms of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and beyond. I mean, Eric, set the what is the market asking for these days? What are some of the demands from customers and partners that you're hearing, and why is hybrid so hot right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Evan, and I think there are a number of drivers. I think the industry continues to evolve. The category of communications has obviously been around for a very long time, and lots of different, I think, pivot points. And when we think back before the pandemic, we were on sort of one path, and there were expectations, but there were also sort of reservations around what did the cloud have to offer, what did multi-tenant versus private cloud have to offer. Obviously, mobile and the app generation sort of created this need and this opportunity to improve user experiences. And so certainly the market was on one trajectory. The pandemic, I think, accelerated a number of those things and certainly accelerated the usage of video, which I think drove a lot more towards SaaS-based solutions. But I think that also opened up some vulnerabilities. And I think in the post-pandemic era, what we're seeing and what we're hearing from customers is this desire to kind of go back to having more of a balanced approach, really balancing, of course, new capabilities, emerging technologies like AI, but wanting a much higher degree of control, whether it's related to security and some of the increased threats that we see in the market, or whether it's related to resiliency and sort of business continuity, really managing the risks in their business, which obviously the dynamics in the market, whether it's geopolitical or otherwise, seem to be accelerating, and that really impacts a lot of larger organizations. So I think that those are the main things that we're seeing. I think we ran a recent survey, over the last several months, about 2,000 IT leaders in Germany, UK, France, and in the US. And what they, over 90% of them said their strategy really was to focus on hybrid. And the primary drivers really centered around that balance, right? They prioritized control was number one, but then also the ability to extend existing investments while adding on top of those existing investments more modern capabilities. So whatever those are, whatever day of the week it is, right? So I think that balance is really what's driving people, in the market today.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Dave, you're shaking your head. Any short comments here before we move on?
It's just whatever's old becomes new again in this industry over and over and over. And so I think one of the interesting things that's occurred is that for a while we had this I don't know, we used to call it PBX, and it became UC, and then it became UCAS, and now I kind of see it more as going back to UC, and UCAS is kind of a way of doing UC, and so you've got unified communications as this parent organization or parent term, and then UCAS as a way of doing it, and so I think we're just kind of the pendulum keeps on moving around and keeps on changing the way we look at this space.
Yeah, well
Just
said.
one thing to just add to that. I think that's right, Dave. And I think we all saw, some of the posts on LinkedIn around the death of SaaS, right? Which we all know that that's not really a reality. What I think is interesting is we're starting to see a bifurcation between SaaS as a subscription or consumption model versus cloud and the different flavors of cloud as a deployment model, right? And so I think that it's the right tool for the right job versus it being a category. And I think that's one of the shifts, which I think Dave does a really good job. And, speaking about, in a number of different formats, and of course, the paper that he recently wrote.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that as well. And Martin, speaking of the UC journey, it's been quite a long and winding road, and you have a very unique and European global perspective on this thing. And really, the reality is where customers are is multi-cloud. And how do you see that trend, and how do you fit into the multi-cloud kind of approach, and why is it unique and different? And what does it mean for private cloud, for private AI as well, where Europe is really focused these days?
Yeah, so you said a very important term here, multi-cloud, right? It's hybrid. When we talk about it, a lot of people still think about like very traditional prem type systems, and then you add in a bit of cloud. Hybrid is so much more than that. It's for us, hybrid is any combination of different types of solutions, and even a combination of two public cloud solutions in a sense is a hybrid solution, and we just fundamentally believe that's where most enterprises are at, and we got a long history of investing, providing solutions in that. Like we've thought about this type of stuff for more than a decade now in R&D, and it's our sole focus in R&D because we fundamentally believe with that complexity that enterprise customers have, you need a different type of approach, and it needs to be more flexible. And we've built a number of tools. We've launched our CloudLink architecture a few years back, for example, and that was a cloud-based application platform. But we didn't move everything into that cloud-based application platform. We're using it as an integration platform for integrating different types of things. So one recent example, of course, is our Zoom announcement. Deeply integrating Zoom Workplace with our core calling capabilities. And that's a typical example of these types of hybrid solutions that we're talking about. And we just believe that, with this combination, and it doesn't just stop at UC, you can also layer in like vertical solutions, and you can layer in contact center solutions as a fully rounded solution. Really, focusing on the enterprise complexity, giving them what they want, providing that open framework to combine all of that together to really then deliver the enterprise-specific capabilities that people are talking about, and whether that's from a regulatory or from a requirement, resiliency, data security perspective, as Dave also highlighted in his white paper, or whether that's a technical requirement, a functional requirement from that perspective, because on that other cloud model you have a better AI model that you want to use for your contact center integration. that's what we want to enable, and that's how we talk about these hybrid use cases or multi-cloud use cases.
Oh, well said, Dave. To talk about hybrid cloud, multi-cloud in a CX and UC world, and your white
Oh,
paper. What were some of the themes there? Because it was, it's behind paywalls, and I can't read it right now. But tell us what some of the
Evan, I
content was.
wrote it for you. I mean, the whole thing was about you. It's interesting you talk about the UCCC thing, because this is one of these things that bring out the boxing gloves. Uh, uh, and AI is kind of changing this conversation too. I guess there's two pieces here. So there's the whole UCCC thing, which I'll get to in just a second. But the AI piece of that is that AI is inherently better from the cloud, because a lot of this AI stuff we're doing now just involves these supercomputers and giant large language models and just all kinds of stuff that comes from the cloud. But that doesn't necessarily mean everything comes from the cloud. And so this UCCC thing, this is a debate that is actually kind of silly. You can look at the Gartner Magic Quadrants, for example, and the UC or the UCAS Magic Quadrant. They actually require that those vendors have a contact center element to be in that Magic Quadrant. But then you look at the contact center Magic Quadrant, and they don't want anything to do with UC. So I mean, they can't even agree with what's going on here, whether what these things should be combined or not. But bottom line is, everything in comms really should be a best of breed play. And so that doesn't mean you don't get everything from one vendor. You can get everything from one vendor. That's fine. In fact, it's a bonus. If you can get everything from one vendor, then you can reduce the number of vendors you have, and you can probably get some savings and all that stuff. But that comes second. The first choice is which applications best meet your needs, and then you choose your vendors. And so it's kind of a cart before the horse type of thing, right? And so if you can do it all with a single vendor, like I said, you get less finger pointing. There's usually some discounts. There's usually some easier to manage and some UI consistencies. But if you do best of breed, a lot of vendors will pick best of breed because they want to reduce switching costs, for example, or they have specific requirements, maybe a compliance issue, or they have to work on the same technology as some other customer or vendor they work with, or something like that. There's lots of reasons. And so, like I said, businesses pick their applications first. Now, what's nice is that Mitel has both, right? You can get the UC and CC from them if you want, or you can do this best of breed and whatever. But that's the customer's choice.
Well said. Speaking of customers, we haven't talked about them yet. So, Eric, there's so much change, so much disruption, uncertainty with 2025, to say the least. And it's so complicated now for customers to navigate this new landscape. What are they telling you and the team at Mitel?
Yeah, no, absolutely that's the case. And as I mentioned before, I think it's a combination of what are the challenges for a given organization, but what are the macro dynamics that are happening in the market that are creating some challenges for them as well. Sometimes it's regulatory challenges, like DORA in the EU as an example, that is driving sort of new consideration, and isn't a given organization ready or not in financial services. That's just sort of one regulatory example. You look at, the data sovereignty, requirements in Germany, another very demanding market. That's certainly both a macro and a business challenge. I think, geopolitical natural disasters, you've got the fires in LA as an example, or the things that are happening in the southeast of the United States. And then, of course, economic dynamics that are constantly changing, and so those all, I think, are one aspect. And then you've got the flip side, which is the business challenges, employee productivity, engagement, connectivity in what we've been talking about as the future of work for some time, which, certainly the pandemic served as a catalyst to move people at least part-time, full-time remote, right? And so I think you look at the decentralization of many large organizations. That's a challenging thing that contributes to a lot of complexity. And then I think some of these emerging goals with things that were unforeseen in terms of the risks associated with bad actors relative to security. Certainly we've seen a number of things. You've got disruption in some cloud services, like what we saw with CrowdStrike a few months ago, and the impact that that had across a number of industries that, again, couldn't be predicted. So this is the new reality for IT, for the CIO, but also for the COO, the CEO, and the CFO, right? It represents a lot of risk to the business that they've got to sort of take into consideration. And I think obviously communications is that one common fabric across any organization, whether it's the interface between employees, right, or it is the interface between a given organization and its customers. And so I think it's, while some people might say, oh, communications isn't as strategic as it maybe once was, they say that until they have one of those disruptions. And then all of a sudden, communications is one of the most strategic things that they've got to get back up and running overnight, right? And so I think from a Mitel perspective, we really look at it and say, okay, well, how, number one, like how can we help? We've got a huge install base of customers in many of these demanding markets, meeting these challenges head on. And I think what we found is that people sort of fall into three scenarios. One is this idea of path of least resistance. I mentioned that earlier, where people want to extend their investments and weave in new capabilities. And maybe ultimately a multi-tenant solution is the right solution for their business, but they don't want to lift and shift overnight, right? And so I think people fall into that category. People fall into that same category of I've got to maintain some of my estate in terms of even prem or private cloud, but some of it I want to move in this other direction. Again, that's a second sort of sub scenario for the path of least resistance. I think the second real bucket or scenario is I call it the gotta have it, right? You're operating in Germany, so therefore your requirements are very specific and you don't have a choice. And so therefore you have to make hybrid decisions based on either those lines of business that are operate out of that location or that specific industry. And I think the third scenario is I call it want to have it, right? This idea of an organization wants that control. They're worried about security, but they're not required in the given industry that they're in. They're just very concerned about the disruption to their business, whether it's a security related or business continuity related risk that they're managing. And so I think largely what we find is that those are the sort of three scenarios. And so for us, it's all about the way we help them is all about optionality. It's about the combination of not just being, Dave's talked a lot about the maturity of a given market and what happens as a market matures. And of course, there's been multiple moments of maturity in the communications industry. And I think we're at another inflection point in that respect, where it's about communications. Doesn't matter how it's delivered. I just want it to be up and running, and I just want it to work. And I want it to fit my business needs. And so from our perspective, hybrid really helps an organization do that when you combine not just products, but real solutions, including services to actually help tailor it for their business. And so to me, that's what we're hearing. Those are the challenges. That's how we're helping the customers that we work with actually address it.
The funny thing about what you're describing there is that you're describing what appears to be the future, but it's really the present. And this is kind of a mind thing, because we've all been thinking that UCaaS, that the whole idea of UCaaS was it was the voice, team chat, and meetings was this triple play, and that was the way we're all going to go, with one triple play. But it's not the way we went, and it's not the way we are going. And so you take something like Microsoft Teams, which is of course very popular. They report something like, I think it's 320 million monthly active users, but they're really referring to chat and meetings. They only have 20 million, something like that, PSTN users. Most of those customers haven't migrated to voice. They're already doing hybrid today. So it's not that we're kind of just almost like looking in the mirror saying, this is the future, and this is kind of and we have a new name for it. Instead of calling it UCaaS, we're calling it hybrid cloud, because that's what it is.
Yeah,
Dave, so right. I mean, I had another discussion with a few guys from international today, and they were more looking at that from a macroeconomic picture. And they said, well, you know what? The promise of UCaaS was like you centralize everything in one location and one tool. That's not where the world is going today. Also, macroeconomically, right? Everybody looks, at his own thing and says, how can I provide resiliency? How can I distribute my risk, as opposed to centralizing everything in one piece? How can I, decentralize stuff from a country level perspective? Because there are so many jurisdictions. If I do business in China or something like that, there are certain things I can do, I can't do. Stuff gets shut down overnight. So like you're right. I mean, the world, both practically as well as from a macro trend, it's gonna be diverse, right? And diverse means hybrid.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about myself. AI and Gen AI, huge opportunity, huge disruption for CX and contact center. And Martin, what does that mean for Mitel, its customers and partners? What's the opportunity, the business value that you see there?
Yeah, huge topic, and lots of action there. Both from a technical perspective, because like large language models are like the hottest thing, of course, and as Dave said, they all come from the cloud, etc. But there are a lot of use cases where they're not optimal, right? Because of the computing power they need, because of response times when you get into real-time scenarios, where there's other technologies emerging like small language models and other things that maybe not as accurate, but have a much faster response time, can do different things. So there, from a technical perspective, what we see as well is people are starting to combine different flavors of AI, different models, to basically turn it into a useful solution. So if you want, that's another angle of hybrid, is like you combine different flavors of that. And the biggest use case, of course, we see in the contact center, or customer experience domain, really high success rate, where with some of the Gen AI technologies, tangible improvements, from a business perspective, where you can really measure results, because a lot of the stuff we all use on a day-to-day basis, it's great, it's innovative, it's interesting, but on some of this stuff, it has yet to prove that it's going to deliver tangible productivity benefits, right? But in the contact center, it's already proven that, and that's why we believe there's fundamental adoption there. Another angle, or sub angle of contact center, is very specific vertical solutions where we see tangible traction as well, and that's what we're focused on, is really practical AI solutions. Our channel partners, or our setup with our channel partners, thousands of channel partners around the world, really knowing the customers, really knowing the use cases, is of course an excellent combination of delivering that tangible value to customers. And in our products, like, we have all the major stuff built in, whether it's virtual agents, transcription type services, agent assist type capabilities, translation services. We got Insights AI, which we launched last year, for analytics, for all the recorded stuff that you have on the data front. And we have really nice vertical AI solutions, for example, in the hospitality segment, etc., where you can use it like almost out of the box, because it's a narrow use case. It's all pre-trained, pre-packaged, very easy to adopt.
You can't sell cloud services and then say out of the box. Come on, Martin.
Yeah. Well, of course, from a sales perspective, we can. The professional service quote, of course, is coming with it. That's a reality, right? In AI today, it's not like you snip your fingers and you're done. It's real implementation work, but it's something we're set up to do as a company as well. We got a big services department, and our partners, several of our partners, have too. So from that perspective, we really see that as a business opportunity. And in the contact center space, you can actually show how that investment, because it is an investment for the customer, is paying off in a finite amount of time, not like over a 20-year horizon, which nobody has the patience for.
Yeah, one
So well
other
said.
interesting thing, Martin, maybe you can touch on, is the other ways that we're using AI in terms of supporting our partners, and in terms of customer support with Maya as an example.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the one thing is AI in our products and solutions, and for our customers. AI is, of course, also very relevant for us as a business. So we've, for example, taken a major step last year, using Gen AI technologies and in our support space, to cut down on response time to partners, to basically provide a knowledge base on steroids, if you so want, right? Where you basically just ask questions to our AI bot, and you'll get the answer, together with the sources and what technical documents you can find. That for that type of stuff, it's super useful. And that of course is for us as an industry like UC solutions are not something that's very easy to implement, right? They're complex. You need a lot of skill set, and accelerating those implementations, making them more affordable, I think could help adoption of new types of solutions down the line, because that was one of the impediments in the past, certainly with the the really high bar that you had to get over.
Well said. Well, look, I mean, we've been very positive, optimistic, and excited about the future here, but I'm going to have to turn to our resident curmudgeon, Dave Michels, who's, Dave, we need to ask you about the real challenges for 2025. There's an issue with resilience, reliability. We've seen network outages, service outages, cloud outages, day in, day out. We've seen security attacks, from really insidious salt typhoon kind of attacks, state actors to kids in their basement. I mean, it's getting a little dark when it comes to resilience out there in the marketplace. So leave us with on a negative note here. What would you say about what we need
Well,
to be aware
I'm
of?
always happy to leave you on a negative note. I appreciate that opportunity. It really is amazing how many vulnerabilities we have in the modern world. One of the things that we got wrong with the internet and the revolution of the network is we thought that we were going to eliminate borders and boundaries and stuff like that. We got that completely wrong. I mean, I'm living in Europe right now, and I can't watch the stuff I want to watch on my streaming services. I mean, everything's got some sort of border. You see what's going on with the TikTok in the U.S. right now. I mean, there's all kinds of it's a new form of a silicon curtain, right? Um, and and uh, and then to your point also about the hackers, and everybody's trying to be sure that their data is protected. You're seeing things like the EU has lots of rules around data sovereignty and making sure that your data is here. These are all factors that are kind of driving, if anything, the hybrid cloud, because uh, some of your workload needs to be under your control, where you can find it where you left it, and it's on your soil, um, and some of it you don't really care about. And like I said, these AI models need to be working in one way, and maybe your other data doesn't need to be so international or global. And there's also so many issues around compliance. If I could do it all over again, I'd be a compliance consultant. My gosh, what an opportunity that is! And so the compliance rules about you have to have your vowels on this server and your consonants on another server. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what's going on in the world of compliance. And so this is really all driving more and more of this hybrid cloud concept, because all these different rules apply to different sets of data and different applications.
Wow, well, it's a mic drop moment for hybrid cloud for sure. And we're winding up here, Eric, but what's your final thoughts on 2025? Your perspective on the communications, and what your practical takeaways here from this session?
Look, I think we're at a point in terms of the maturity curve where people want it their way based on what their business needs and challenges are. And business strategy needs to drive technology strategy. And so I think that's the key. And so because of that, I think, for me, the word of the day is optionality. It gives them the right balance of control, and a recognition that, kind of one size doesn't fit all. That you need kind of a level of flexibility, to bring the right tool for the right job or the right use case kind of forward. So to me, that's tailoring for your business, whether it's vertical or whether you just have a very complex enterprise based on the different locations you have, et cetera. I think it all comes back to optionality and control.
Oh, well said. And Martin, tell us where you'll be focused in 2025 from an R&D standpoint, partnering standpoint, go to market. What are you laser focused on?
Yeah, from R&D perspective, we're laser focused on these hybrid communication solution, including contact center or customer experience solutions. That's a very clear focus for us. We're not focused on trying to rebuild a better version of stuff that people are already using. We're really focused on being that partner that can bring all of these different solutions together for our customers, and that involves some of our own portfolio. That involves partner portfolio. And so we are open and will continue to be open. We've always been open, more open than others as a company. That's our heritage as well. So it's not something that's completely new to us, but now this multi-cloud hybrid, of course, raises that to a new level. And as part of that, we are also focused on end-to-end solutions for our customer, which inevitably means we need to be really focused on vertical solutions as well from that perspective. And then from a technology perspective, it's of course the AI adoption. How do we really make that useful, tangible? These really great use cases for customers. Flagship examples. I think there is a lot of work to be done over the next couple of years, because I fundamentally believe we can't just all be happy with meeting transcription and summarization as the ultimate goal for AI. There's got to be more, right? There's got to be more for this technology, and that's what we're focused on.
Brilliant. And Dave, where can people see you, meet you in
Well,
the US and
no. I
Europe,
want to answer that same
elsewhere?
question. They got to answer, because I want to emphasize one important point, that to me this is mostly about a mind shift change. And a really good example of this is actually Mitel and Zoom. They partnered last year, and they helped complement each other. That could have happened 10 years ago, but it didn't happen 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, the mind shift was a zero-sum game. Zoom thought they were going to own the world, and Mitel thought they were going to own the world. They were both going at it zero sum. And what's changed is this mind shift that complementing the vendors, and the vendors working together and creating these multiple clouds and multi-cloud or hybrid clouds, whatever you want to call it, is making the customer much stronger. And that's really what's changed. I think that's important. But to answer your question you actually asked me, TalkingPointz.com, that's points with a Z on the end, and I would love to talk to you.
Wow, a rare positive and uplifting mic drop moment from Dave. We're going to check out the white paper. As always, check out the latest with Mitel, with really interesting discussion. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Evan.
And thanks, everyone, for listening, watching, and sharing. Take care.